I stood at the back of the funeral service, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, trying to make myself invisible. The room was packed with people, but no one looked my way. My wife, Karina, was seated at the front with the rest of the family, her face a perfect mask of grief. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider. It was her father, Glenn Darby, who had passed away. A massive figure in the oil industry, a man who had built an empire from the ground up. And there she was, delivering a speech in front of the crowd, her voice cracking just enough to make it sound genuine. The way she spoke about him, about how much she would miss him, how she could never repay him for all he'd done, made me feel like I didn't even exist. I watched her, standing tall at the podium, surrounded by her family, her mother, her brothers, aunts, uncles, all of them nodding along, hanging on her every word. But there I was, just another face in the back. The one who wasn't mentioned. The one who didn't matter. She spoke with such conviction, but as her eyes scanned the room, I caught a glimpse of something, a whisper, just between her and a man seated next to me. They shared a laugh. The kind of laugh that made my stomach twist, as if they were in on a joke I wasn't part of. I turned away, the air suddenly feeling too thick, my head pounding as the weight of it all pressed down. But then my eyes fell on something, a small, folded document poking out of Karina's clutch. She had dropped her handkerchief earlier, and as I bent down to pick it up, I couldn't help but notice it. A case number. My name. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Karina had filed for divorce. Secretly. Before the funeral. And then, as if to mock me further, she deliberately dropped the handkerchief again, just in front of me. I picked it up and, in that split second, caught another glimpse of the document. I couldn't stop myself from reading the case number, the line that made my blood run cold. Divorce filing. Karina Darby versus Wendell Darby. I blinked. This wasn't real. Not here, not now. But it was. And then, everything clicked into place. In 2 days, when the will was read, Karina would inherit $250 million. And I, the man who had been silently humiliated for years, would be left with nothing but the scraps she chose to throw my way. I wanted to scream, but instead, I stayed there, frozen, watching her, watching them all as my world began to crumble. I had no idea how to face her after this, how to stand next to her when she would soon own everything, when she'd hold all the power, and I'd be nothing. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a game, and I hadn't even known I was playing. The realization sunk in, deep and cold, and all I could do was stand there, isolated, while the service continued around me like I was invisible. The room was filled with hushed murmurs as we all gathered around a long wooden table at Glenn's sprawling estate. The lawyer, a stoic man in his late 50s, stood at the head of the table, flipping through the papers of Glenn Darby's will. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and looked up at all of us, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for being here today," the lawyer began, his voice echoing slightly in the grand, quiet room. "I'll begin by reading the provisions of Mr. Darby's will, as per his wishes." I could feel the tension in the air. Karina, sitting to my right, barely spared me a glance, her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed ahead as the lawyer continued. "To my beloved daughter, Karina Darby," he read aloud, "I leave $1 million, to be used as she sees fit." There was a slight pause, as if the lawyer was expecting her to respond. But Karina didn't flinch. She merely nodded, her face still locked in a mask of composure. "Wait a minute," Karina's voice broke through the silence, high and sharp, as though she were waiting for a punchline. "That's only $1 million? It should be." The lawyer raised a hand, cutting her off with practiced ease. "I assure you, Mrs. Darby, that's the amount Mr. Darby specified in his will. But my father's worth hundreds of millions." Karina's voice wavered slightly, but she quickly regained control. "Are you sure this is right?" "Quite sure, ma'am," the lawyer replied. "And now, to continue. The remainder of the estate, including financial assets, properties, and personal effects, shall be divided according to the terms of the attached letter." Karina was visibly frustrated now, her eyes flashing with disbelief. She shot me a quick glance, as if to say, "What's going on?" I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My heart hammered in my chest, and the urge to stand up and shout at everyone for their ignorance nearly overtook me. But I stayed quiet, gripping the edge of the table, my mind racing. The lawyer shifted the papers, his fingers brushing over the pages with precise calmness, before he picked up a sealed envelope. He opened it carefully and cleared his throat before speaking again. "To Wendell Darby, my son-in-law, I leave the sum of $250 million. A collective gasp filled the room. I could feel Karina stiffen beside me, her breath catching as she turned slowly to look at me. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted in shock. "Wait. What?" she whispered, barely audible. The lawyer continued, unfazed. "This sum is given to Mr. Darby for enduring a marriage of emotional distress and hardship at the hands of his spouse. The full amount is to be distributed in its entirety upon finalization of the divorce between the two parties. Should the marriage remain intact for a period of 18 months following Mr. Darby's receipt of the inheritance, the funds will remain his. However, if he were to reconcile with his spouse, the estate will revert to a charitable trust in the name of the Darby family's preferred animal sanctuary." The lawyer looked up, his expression calm as ever. This clause, ladies and gentlemen, was explicitly laid out by Mr. Darby in an effort to ensure his son-in-law's freedom. I didn't know how to respond. My breath felt like it was caught in my throat, a strange buzzing in my ears drowning out the murmurs of the others in the room. The words, $250 million, echoed in my mind like a steady drumbeat. This wasn't possible. How could Glenn, how could my father-in-law have left me this? And why? The questions piled on top of each other, threatening to crush me. Karina's voice cut through the silence, desperate. No, this can't be right." Her voice trembled now, shaking with panic. "Wendell, you've got to be kidding me. This is a mistake, right?" I didn't know how to answer her. I didn't even know how to react to what I was hearing. The room felt like it was closing in on me. How had Glenn done this? Why had he done this? What kind of twisted game was he playing? Karina leaned over, her fingers digging into my arm as she whispered fiercely, "You've got to say something. We need to fix this. I don't care about the 1 million, Wendell. We'll figure it out. This money was supposed to be mine." I looked at her, her face contorted with confusion and rage, but all I could feel was numbness. The world outside the room felt so far away, and I realized with a sickening certainty, this was it. Glenn had played us all. And now, I was standing in the middle of a game I had never even known existed. The money, the inheritance, it wasn't just a gift. It was a punishment. A cruel reminder of everything I'd been through. Everything Karina had put me through. "Karina," I finally said, my voice low, distant, "this isn't about us anymore. It never was. It was about Glenn. He wanted to control us, even after he was gone." Her grip tightened on my arm, but I shook it off. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Not now. Not after this. Karina stood, her voice rising, but the lawyer's stern expression kept her in check. She turned to face him, as if hoping he would fix this, but the lawyer didn't flinch. He had done his job. It wasn't his fault. I felt the weight of the room shift. Karina was no longer the woman I'd married. She wasn't the person I had fought for. I realized now, with startling clarity, that I wasn't just part of this family by accident. I had been a pawn in Glenn's game. And now, I was stuck in the middle of it. As Karina seethed beside me, all I could think about was the money. The inheritance. The freedom Glenn had unknowingly given me, even as he tried to bind me to his daughter for the rest of my life. It was up to me now. And I wasn't sure I knew how to play this game. But one thing was certain, I was done being anyone's pawn. The next day, Karina showed up at my office, as though nothing had happened, as though the world hadn't been ripped apart just hours before. She was in a sleek black dress, her hair perfectly styled, looking as polished and composed as she always did when she was trying to make everything look effortless. But I could see it in her eyes, the panic. The cracks in her mask that she was desperately trying to hide. She walked into my office without knocking, the door swinging open with an almost violent force. "Wendell," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. "We need to talk. Now." I didn't stand up. I didn't even look at her at first. Instead, I focused on the paperwork on my desk, pretending that I could lose myself in something, anything, other than the woman who had just filed for divorce and then turned around to trap me in an inheritance I never asked for. "Wendell," I said now, she repeated, her voice more insistent this time. I let out a long breath, sitting back in my chair and finally looking up at her. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the way she might have expected. I was tired. Tired of being the second choice. Tired of being the one who always had to fix everything, even when nobody cared enough to fix it for me. "Karina, what do you want?" I asked, my tone calm, almost too calm for her liking. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She went straight to the point. "The inheritance, this whole thing with your name and Glenn's will, it's ridiculous. You know that. You can't possibly think you deserve all of that." Her words stung, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was the realization that she had been planning to manipulate me this whole time. Karina wasn't even shocked by the inheritance. She wasn't surprised by the twist Glenn had thrown into all of this. She was angry. Angry that it hadn't gone her way. "You don't even understand what this is," she continued, her eyes flickering with a mix of desperation and anger. "I've been working my whole life for everything. And now you're the one who's going to inherit all of it? Do you have any idea what kind of mess this is going to create? Do you think anyone's going to respect you? You think my family is going to just accept this?" "I'm not interested in your family's respect," I replied coldly. "I never was." She flinched, but only slightly, and then she straightened up, her posture regaining the control she had lost a moment before. "I don't want to do this the hard way, Wendell. Let's make a deal. You and me. We'll split it. I'll take what I deserve, and you can keep some of it, but not all of it. That's a reasonable offer, don't you think?" I leaned forward, my elbows on the desk, my gaze steady and unwavering as I looked her in the eye. "No deal, Karina." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw real anger flash across her face. The kind of anger that burned bright and then quickly simmered into something colder, more calculating. "You don't get to walk away with all of it, Wendell. You don't deserve it. You've never deserved any of it. You've always been the second choice." I stood up slowly, my hands resting on the edge of the desk as I looked down at her. "This isn't about what I deserve, Karina. This is about what Glenn decided. And I don't care about the money. I never did." Her eyes widened, as if she didn't expect me to say that. She opened her mouth, then closed it, visibly flustered by my calm response. "You don't care?" she asked, incredulous. "You don't care about $250 million? Are you out of your mind?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I don't care about it. But I do care about getting out from under you, Karina. I care about finally being free from your manipulation. I care about finally standing up for myself." There was a long pause as she processed my words. For the first time, she looked uncertain. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "I'm not going to negotiate with you. I don't want your money, and I sure as hell don't want to be part of your little scheme to control everything. If you think this is about money, you're wrong. This is about freedom, and I'm taking mine." Karina's lips pressed into a thin line, and I saw the storm behind her eyes. She wasn't used to being told no. She wasn't used to anyone standing up to her. But I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to be the person she could walk all over anymore. "Fine," she spat, turning on her heel to leave. "But you'll regret this. You think this is over? You think you're free? You're nothing, Wendell. You're a symbol, a piece in a game you don't even understand." She slammed the door behind her, and I stood there for a moment, staring at the space she had just vacated. Her words stung, but not in the way they once would have. Now, they were just hollow threats. She was losing control, and she knew it. And as much as she tried to manipulate me, I wasn't going to play by her rules anymore. I was done being her pawn. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the power, and I wasn't going to let Karina take it away from me. A few days after my confrontation with Karina, I found myself sitting across from one of Glenn's estate attorneys in his polished, pristine office. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound legal tomes that looked like they had never been touched. The faint smell of expensive wood and polished metal hung in the air, making me feel both out of place and oddly claustrophobic. The lawyer, a man named Robert Thornton, sat behind his desk, pushing his glasses up his nose as he carefully went over a few documents in front of him. His eyes flickered to me as he cleared his throat, a strange mix of professional detachment and something else in his gaze. I couldn't place it, but there was something in the way he looked at me, like I was a piece of property he had to deal with, not a person. "Mr. Darby," he began, breaking the silence, "I wanted to go over a particular clause in Mr. Darby's will that I believe you should be aware of." I leaned forward slightly, trying to ignore the cold sweat that had started to form on my palms. My mind was still reeling from the will reading. Karina's reaction to the inheritance, her fury, her desperation to claw back control, it made me uneasy. This whole situation felt like something out of a bad dream, but the words I'd heard were still real. I had expected some legal formalities, maybe a few details about the estate or how things would be split. But then, out of nowhere, came the bombshell, the clause that tied my inheritance to my marriage. The condition that I had to remain divorced from Karina for 18 months or lose everything. Everything. Thornton slid a piece of paper across the desk to me. "Mr. Darby, your inheritance is contingent on your staying divorced for a period of 18 months. Should you reconcile with your wife before that period ends, the estate will be redirected to a charitable trust specifically, a dog sanctuary that Mr. Darby had a particular interest in. I stared at the paper in front of me, the words swimming before my eyes. The cold clarity of what Glenn had done began to sink in. He had orchestrated everything. He had set up a scenario where I couldn't go back to Karina without losing it all. And he knew that the very thing that could make me free, this inheritance, would be the thing that trapped me. I picked up the paper, feeling its weight, the ink pressing into my fingers like it was branded into my soul. 18 months, I muttered under my breath. If I reconcile with Karina, it goes to a dog sanctuary? Correct, Thornton replied, his tone even. A rather unusual stipulation, but one Mr. Darby felt strongly about. He was concerned about your well-being, Mr. Darby. Concerned about your continued relationship with your wife. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure if I felt more betrayed by Glenn for playing me this way or more trapped by the weight of the situation. 18 months. If I reconciled with Karina, something I couldn't see happening, but still, I'd lose everything. Thornton noticed the look on my face, the confusion, the disbelief. I understand this is difficult to comprehend. However, I'm obligated to make sure you understand the full terms of the will. I set the paper down, leaning back in my chair. The full weight of Glenn's manipulation hit me hard, and I had to fight to keep my emotions in check. The inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about control. Glenn wanted me to be free, but only if I stayed away from Karina. He wanted me to suffer first, to make sure that I didn't go back to her without paying the price. How long after the 18 months does the trust activate? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. It activates immediately upon the finalization of your divorce, Thornton replied. Once the period is complete, the funds will be accessible to you. If, of course, you meet the conditions outlined in the will. I nodded slowly. It was clear now. Glenn hadn't just given me a gift. He had set up a trap. He wanted me free from Karina, but only on his terms. The money, the power, the freedom, it all came with conditions. What if I decide I don't care about the inheritance? I asked, my words harsher than I expected. Thornton looked at me over his glasses, his face unreadable. That is certainly your choice, Mr. Darby. However, I would recommend you think carefully before making any decisions. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Thornton cleared his throat again. There's one more matter I must bring to your attention. If you do reconcile with your wife before the 18-month period ends, not only will you lose the inheritance, but Mr. Darby has also requested that a separate clause be enacted, redirecting all remaining assets to the dog sanctuary of his choosing. In essence, should you fail to comply with the terms, you would lose the estate altogether. I felt sick. I couldn't breathe. Karina had no idea what Glenn had done, but I realized with a sudden clarity that Glenn wasn't just trying to give me freedom. He was trying to break me, trying to make sure I didn't fall back into her arms, that I wouldn't go crawling back to the woman who had manipulated me for years. I thought of Karina, sitting in that room earlier, her face flushed with anger, trying to force me into her game, trying to control the narrative. But now I saw it. She was as trapped as I was. We were both pawns in a game neither of us had chosen. I'll need to think about all this, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I felt like a weight had been placed on my chest, and no matter how I tried, I couldn't seem to move beneath it. Take all the time you need, Mr. Darby, Thornton said, his voice steady, almost too calm. But remember, your freedom and your future depends on your choices now. I stood up slowly, my knees weak, my mind spinning. I wasn't just dealing with the aftermath of Glenn's death. I was dealing with a legacy that would haunt me for the rest of my life. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I could walk away from it. I wasn't sure I wanted to. The door clicked shut behind me, and I was left standing in the cold, sterile hallway with nothing but questions. The game was far from over, and I wasn't sure who the winner would be in the end. The next day, Karina showed up at my apartment, uninvited, as always, looking like she had just stepped out of a high-end boutique. Her heels clicked against the floor with an air of determination, but her eyes were dark with something else, desperation. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, but I wasn't really watching. The entire situation, everything that had unfolded with Glenn's will, the inheritance, the clause about the divorce, it was swirling in my head like a storm. And now, Karina was here, and I had no idea what she thought she could do to fix it. "You got your money," she started, as if that should have been enough. "So what's the problem now, Wendell? Why are you making this so difficult?" I didn't respond right away. I was still trying to figure out what I felt. Anger, confusion, betrayal, all of it wrapped up in a tight knot in my stomach. Karina stood there, arms crossed, her eyes glaring at me, waiting for me to say something. "Do you really think I'm going to let you walk away with everything?" she demanded, as if it was all so simple, as if she hadn't just played a part in all of this. "You think you're going to just keep it all? You think you're going to be free?" I stood up slowly, walking over to the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking as I gripped the edge of the countertop, trying to keep myself from flying off the handle. "You filed for divorce behind my back," I said quietly. "You've been plotting this for months. Don't act like you're the one who's been wronged here." Karina's expression faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered, stepping closer, her voice softening. "Wendell, I did what I had to do. Do you think I wanted it to come to this? You think I wanted to lose everything? Then why didn't you say anything?" I shot back, my frustration building. "Why didn't you talk to me about any of this? Why leave me in the dark? You made your choice, Karina. You filed for divorce before your father even died, and now you're acting like it's my fault." She reached out, placing a hand on my arm, but I shook it off. "I'm not your pawn anymore, Karina. I'm not the guy you can manipulate, not this time." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in them, regret, maybe, or fear. But it was gone before I could pinpoint it. "You don't understand," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't know what to do without it. Without you, without the money. I can't lose it all. I can't lose everything my father worked for." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I choked it back. It was never about me, Karina. It was never about us. It was always about the money. She stepped back, her eyes flashing with frustration. "It's not just about the money, Wendell. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I don't know how to live without everything. You know how hard it's been for me, how hard it's been to pretend everything's okay when it never was. I've been carrying this for so long, pretending to be something I'm not. And now it's all slipping away." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long time. There was no love there anymore. There hadn't been for a while. There was just emptiness. And now, with Glenn's death, all the carefully constructed walls she had built around herself were crumbling. "I can't fix this for you, Karina," I said quietly. "I can't make it go away. I'm not your savior. I'm not the guy who's going to pull you out of the mess you've made." Her face twisted, but she tried to hold it together. "I never asked you to be my savior. I asked you to be my partner. But instead, you're throwing everything away. You're going to let it all fall apart, aren't you? You're going to walk away from me, from everything we've built, over money." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence between us spoke louder than words ever could. Karina's eyes darted around the room, as if looking for something to ground herself in. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I can't let you have it all, Wendell. I won't. I'll fight you for it. I'll get everything back, and I'll make sure you don't walk away with a single cent." I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't just desperation now. It was something darker. "You don't get it, do you?" I said slowly. "This isn't about the money anymore. It's about the life I want. A life without you, without the control, without all of this manipulation. I'm done." She stared at me, her face a mix of shock and anger. "You can't walk away from me. You think I won't fight you for everything? You think I'll just let you take it all and leave me with nothing?" "I'm not taking anything from you, Karina," I said, my voice firm. "I'm just walking away. You can have it all, but it's not enough. Not for me." I turned away from her, the finality of the words hitting both of us at the same time. She didn't say anything else. She didn't try to stop me. I walked out of the apartment, my mind a mess of swirling thoughts, but one thing was clear: Karina had never been about love. She was about control. And now, for the first time in years, I was free. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But as I stepped outside into the cold air, I knew deep down that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following days were filled with the aftermath of Karina's desperate attempt to regain control, but I felt strangely detached from it all. There was no sense of victory, no relief, just a hollow emptiness as I tried to wrap my mind around everything that had happened. I hadn't expected to walk away from her, or from this inheritance, so easily. But as the days went by, the weight of Glenn's manipulation started to feel heavier, suffocating. I had barely begun to process the consequences when a letter arrived. It was an unassuming envelope, thick, cream-colored, with no return address. I had just returned home from a meeting when I found it resting on my kitchen table. The handwriting on the front wasn't Karina's, but I recognized it immediately: Robert Thornton's. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. A sense of foreboding settled in my chest, the calm before the storm. I unfolded the letter, my eyes scanning it quickly. Mr. Wendell Darby, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to you in regard to certain legal matters related to your inheritance and the stipulations therein. While we have discussed the majority of the provisions, there is an important matter you should be made aware of regarding the condition of your inheritance, something that was not explicitly mentioned during the reading of the will. You will find enclosed a document that I believe will be of great importance to you, especially in light of recent events. I recommend you review it at your earliest convenience. Regards, Robert Thornton. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The last sentence didn't sit right with me. An important matter? What more could Glenn have hidden? I had already felt like I was drowning in this inheritance. What more could there possibly be? I opened the second part of the letter, and my heart sank when I saw it, a clause. Not one I had been told about during the will reading. It was a hidden addendum to Glenn's will, one I had no idea existed. And reading it felt like a sucker punch. Addendum to the will of Glenn Darby. In light of the recent developments, I have decided to add the following stipulation regarding my son-in-law Wendell Darby's inheritance. Should Wendell Darby fail to remain divorced from Karina Darby for a period of 18 months following the inheritance payout, I further stipulate that 40% of the estate will be locked in a trust until the 18-month period is completed. If Wendell Darby reconciles with Karina Darby during this period, he will forfeit the entirety of the estate, and all assets will be redirected to a charitable organization as chosen by the family. Additionally, it is important to note that should Wendell Darby fail to meet the conditions of the inheritance, the money will be used in full to benefit a dog sanctuary that Mr. Darby was very fond of. There will be no opportunity for appeal or changes once the final decision is made. This clause is final and binding upon all parties. My eyes scanned the document again and again, the meaning sinking in slowly. Glenn hadn't just locked me into an 18-month period. He had conditioned the inheritance on my emotional separation from Karina, ensuring that if I ever went back to her, I would lose everything. And not only that, 40% of the estate was tied up in a trust. I wouldn't have access to a significant portion of the money unless I could manage to stay away from her for a year and a half. The reality of it hit me like a slap in the face. Glenn had designed this will like a labyrinth. I could only win if I never looked back. But there was more. There was the cruelty of it. If Karina and I reconciled, the money wouldn't just go back to her. No, it would be siphoned away to an animal sanctuary. The ultimate punishment for both of us. I leaned back in the chair, the letter still gripped in my hands, the weight of it suffocating me. This wasn't just about money. Glenn wasn't concerned with the wealth, he was concerned with breaking us, severing me from Karina entirely, even after his death. He'd engineered a trap that would keep me from ever going back to her. A part of me, the part that still longed for freedom, wanted to laugh. I had been free of Karina, free of her control, for the first time in a long time. And now Glenn, in his final act, had made sure that freedom was locked away with conditions and consequences that would haunt me for months. I didn't even know if I could survive 18 months of this. The inheritance, the pressure, the manipulation, it was all too much. The question that lingered in my mind, though, was this. Why? Why had Glenn done this? Why had he put me through this, when he was supposed to be giving me a way out? I had so many questions, but no answers. Just an inheritance that came with chains. I folded the letter and shoved it back into the envelope, my mind swirling with the implications. The financial freedom, the escape from Karina's grip, everything came with a price. And that price wasn't just the money, it was the choice I had to make, to stay away from Karina, to endure 18 months of isolation, or to return to her and lose it all. It was all too much. I needed answers, but none of the people who could give them to me were anywhere near. I pulled my phone out, scrolling through my contacts. I paused when I saw Karina's name at the top of the list. I didn't call her. Not yet. But I knew I would have to soon. The pieces of this twisted game were falling into place, and I had no choice but to play. I arrived back at the Darby estate a few days later, unsure of what I was doing there. The massive house loomed in front of me like a cold reminder of everything that had gone wrong, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be there, like I still had unfinished business to settle. The place was eerily quiet when I stepped inside. The servants and staff had mostly cleared out after the funeral, but there were still a few lingering, taking care of final details. I had been here enough times to know the layout, but this time it felt different. There was a sense of finality to it, a weight that pressed down on me as I walked through the empty halls. I had come for one thing, the library. Glenn had always been obsessed with books. His collection was legendary, with shelves that lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with tomes on everything from world history to obscure legal texts. I had spent hours in there, even years ago when Karina and I were still living under his roof, talking to him about anything and everything. But now, the thought of stepping into that room made my skin crawl. Still, I had a reason to go. There was something important in there. Something Glenn had left behind that I needed to find. I made my way down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The library was at the end of the hall, tucked away in a corner of the estate that felt even more remote now that it was empty. When I reached the door, I hesitated. A strange sense of dread crept over me, but I pushed it aside. I had to do this. I had to uncover whatever secret Glenn had left for me. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The smell of old paper and leather filled the air. The shelves were just as I remembered them, massive, towering over me, filled with books I had never read and would probably never have the time to. The room felt smaller now, more oppressive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something. I moved toward the far side of the room, where Glenn had always kept a small desk tucked between two bookshelves. There was a drawer there, one I had never dared to open before, one that had always been locked. But now, the drawer stood ajar, and I felt an odd mixture of curiosity and fear rising in my chest. I pulled it open slowly, almost afraid of what I might find. Inside, among a stack of papers, was a small flash drive, unmarked, like something out of a spy movie. My fingers brushed against it, and a chill ran through me. What the hell was this? Why had Glenn kept something like this hidden here, of all places? I stared at the flash drive for a long moment, my mind racing. The weight of it seemed so much heavier than it should have been. I didn't even know if I wanted to know what was on it, but there was no turning back now. With a sigh, I grabbed it and shoved it into my pocket. I turned to leave the library, but something caught my eye. One of Glenn's old leather-bound journals was resting on the desk, open to a page. I couldn't resist. I walked over and scanned the page, my eyes immediately falling on a familiar phrase. For Wendell, the game has just begun. My breath caught in my throat. What was this? Glenn had always been cryptic, always leaving me with strange advice or ambiguous comments. But this was different. There was something chilling about it, like he knew what was coming before any of us did. I flipped through the rest of the journal, finding more notes to me, notes I didn't remember reading. Notes that seemed to suggest Glenn had been planning all of this for years. His manipulation, the inheritance, the trust, everything. And then I came across something that made my heart stop, a handwritten note in the margins of the last page. Wendell, when you find this, you will finally understand. Everything I've done, every decision I made, was to give you the choice, to give you the power. But remember this, you can never go back. I dropped the journal back on the desk, my hands trembling. What the hell was Glenn talking about? What had he done? I felt like I was suffocating. My mind was racing, but there were too many unanswered questions. I needed answers, and this flash drive, whatever was on it, was my only lead. I grabbed the drive from my pocket and headed straight for my car. I didn't care about anything else. Not Karina. Not the inheritance. I just needed to know what Glenn had left for me. I needed to understand what kind of game he had been playing. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I didn't even notice the streets or the cars around me. All I could think about was the flash drive, the mysterious message in Glenn's journal. It was as if everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my life, had just been shattered into pieces, and now I was left trying to put it all back together. I parked outside my apartment, heart racing, and took the flash drive up with me. Inside, I sat at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, the drive plugged into the USB port. A click, a whir, and then a folder appeared on the screen. Inside, there was a video file titled simply, For Wendell. I clicked play, and the screen flickered to life. And there, on the screen, was Glenn, sitting in his study, looking directly into the camera. He looked calm, controlled, just like always. But the words that followed made my blood run cold. Wendell, if you're watching this, then I'm already gone. And if you think you've figured out the game, you've only just begun to understand the rules. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about inheritance. It wasn't about money. This was something else entirely. And I had no idea what Glenn was about to reveal. This is your freedom, Wendell, but it comes with a price. You can't turn back now, and you can't let her win. Not now. Not ever. The screen went black. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, unable to move. Glenn had left me with more than money. He had left me with a twisted legacy, one that I didn't know if I could survive. But I had no choice now. I had to keep going. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. I didn't expect her to come to me. I didn't expect Karina to come crawling back. But there she was, standing in front of my apartment door, her knuckles pale from how tightly she was gripping her purse. It was late, the streetlights outside casting long shadows across the floor behind me as I opened the door. She didn't look like she had slept, and there was an edge to her appearance, a kind of controlled chaos that was all too familiar. She had always been like that, trying to look perfect while holding together a life that was unraveling at the seams. "Wendell," Karina said, her voice tentative, the sharp edges from our previous confrontation gone. I need to talk to you." I didn't invite her in. I didn't even step aside. I just stood in the doorway, staring at her. I wasn't sure what she was expecting from me. Part of me thought she would beg, but this version of her, this woman who had always demanded control, was different. She was desperate. "Talk," I said flatly. "But understand this, Karina, I'm not playing your games anymore. You can't manipulate me, and you sure as hell can't control this inheritance." Her eyes flashed, the frustration creeping back in. "It's not about the money," she shot back. "Not anymore. It never was." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because that's all I've heard from you for the past few days. All I've heard is what you stand to lose, what you think I'm taking from you." Karina took a deep breath and stepped closer, her voice softening. "I didn't file for divorce because of the money. I did it because I knew I had to. Glenn's will, you're right. It wasn't just about us. It was about him trying to control everything, even after he's gone. But I'm not trying to control you, Wendell. Not anymore." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my throat. "You want me to believe that now? After everything?" She stopped herself, clearly trying to find the right words. "I didn't realize what I had. I didn't realize what I was losing until now. Until this whole thing with the will happened. It's just all been so much pressure." I stood there, feeling the weight of her words like an anchor pulling me down, but I wasn't ready to let it drag me under. The past was a tangled mess, and I couldn't let her walk back into my life, thinking we could just pick up where we left off. "I can't go back to that life, Karina," I said, my voice firm. "You've hurt me too many times for me to just pretend it's fine. All those years of being second to everything. Second to your family, second to your image. I've had enough. And now, Glenn, even in death, has made sure that I can't go back. And I'm not going to." Her face softened for just a second, like she was about to break down. But then she pulled herself together, straightening up and crossing her arms, like the Karina I knew was reappearing. "I'm not asking you to go back," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I need your help, Wendell. I can't do this alone. You said it yourself, I'm a mess. I'm drowning in all of this, and I don't know what to do. But you still care about me. I know you do." I looked at her, feeling the weight of her words pull at me. There was a time when I would have believed her, when I would have done anything for her. But not anymore. "You don't get to make me feel sorry for you, Karina," I said. "You've had everything. You've had the family, the money, the life you wanted. And now you're standing here, asking me to give it all up. For what? So you can get back to controlling me?" She winced, the words stinging, but she didn't back down. "No, Wendell. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to be honest with you. Glenn, he knew what he was doing. He put us both in a trap, and now we're stuck with the consequences. But I don't want to keep fighting with you. I just want to find a way out of this mess. For both of us." I paused, trying to read her, trying to figure out if she was being truthful or if this was just another game she was playing. But something about her tone, something about the way she said the words, "we're stuck," made me hesitate. "You've had your chance to get out, Karina," I said, voice low. "You filed for divorce. You made your decision. And now you want me to come back? To fix it? No, I'm done. You've had your shot." She looked at me for a long time, searching my face for any sign that I would change my mind. But I didn't. "I'm not going to be your backup, Karina," I said, voice shaking with emotion now. "You either want to fix it or you don't. But I'm not going to be the one to keep saving you. I've done enough of that. You need to face the reality of what you've done, and so do I." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling at her sides. She looked like she was about to say something, but then she just shook her head, letting out a small, defeated sigh. "Fine," she whispered. "I get it. You've made your choice. But don't think I won't keep fighting for what I deserve." With that, She turned on her heel, walking out the door without another word. I stood there for a long moment, my heart racing, trying to process everything she had said. The room felt colder now, emptier. But I knew deep down that I had made the right decision. I had finally drawn the line. I had walked away, and I wasn't going back. It had been weeks since Karina and I last spoke. The quiet tension had settled between us, but the storm was far from over. The inheritance, the clause in Glenn's will, and the way she tried to manipulate me all kept pressing at the back of my mind. I thought I had walked away from it, but I hadn't. Not completely. That's when the court papers came. The sound of my phone buzzing in the middle of a quiet afternoon caught my attention. I glanced at the screen. A call from Robert Thornton, Glenn's estate lawyer. "Mr. Darby, I need you to be in court on Monday," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "Karina is contesting the will." My heart sank. Of course she was. I should have seen this coming, but the reality of it hit me harder than I expected. Karina wasn't about to let go of the fortune Glenn had left behind, even if it meant tearing down everything in her path. I barely heard Thornton's instructions as he detailed the time and place. I hung up the phone with a sense of inevitability. Karina wasn't going to let me have the freedom Glenn had promised me. She'd take me to court, drag me through the mud, and try to reclaim what she felt she was owed. I had no choice. I had to fight back. The courtroom was filled with people. Lawyers, witnesses, estate representatives, all gathered to witness the drama unfold. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded in front of me, trying to steady my nerves. Thornton sat beside me, flipping through papers, looking just as calm and collected as ever. But it wasn't him in the spotlight. It was Karina, seated on the opposite side, looking every bit the picture of poise and control, just like she always did when she was putting on a show. She dressed in a tailored suit, her makeup flawless, her eyes hard with determination. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing and was ready to take everything from me. The judge entered the room, and the proceedings began. Karina's lawyer spoke first, outlining her claims. She argued that the will had been altered under duress, that Glenn had been manipulated by me into leaving me the inheritance, and that she, as his daughter, was entitled to a greater share of the estate. Her words were smooth, calculated, and full of empty emotion, aimed at gaining sympathy from the judge, from anyone listening. It made my stomach churn to hear her twist the truth so easily. My turn came soon after. Thornton stood up, confident as always, and began to lay out the facts, how Glenn had written the will long before his death, how it was witnessed by multiple people, and how it clearly stated his intentions. It was clear, he argued, that Glenn wanted me to have the inheritance, not Karina, because he saw that I had suffered under her manipulative control for years. The courtroom was silent as Thornton presented evidence, witness testimony from family members who knew about the dysfunction in Karina and my marriage, financial records showing the strain I had endured, and, most damning of all, video footage from Glenn's own home that showed him speaking about his concerns for me. Glenn had spoken to a camera, recorded with the intent to ensure his wishes were followed. Everything was documented. Then came the video. I hadn't known about it until this moment. The footage flickered on the screen, and there was Glenn, his voice raspy but calm, sitting in his study. His face was more serious than I had ever seen it before. "Wendell," Glenn said into the camera, "I want you to understand something. You've been through hell with my daughter. I've watched it happen, and I've seen the toll it's taken on you. This inheritance is not just about the money, Wendell. It's about freedom. Your freedom." He went on, outlining his reasons for leaving the inheritance to me, not Karina. He talked about the years of manipulation, how he had seen the strain in our marriage, and how he wanted me to be free to live a life without the control, the emotional abuse. "This is for you, Wendell," Glenn's recorded voice said. "It's the chance to walk away from her, to rebuild, to have a future that's yours, and yours alone." The camera cut to black. It was the final blow. Karina's lawyer had no argument left, no counterpoint to make. It was clear to the judge now, clear to everyone, that Glenn's will was not a product of manipulation, but a carefully thought-out decision. Glenn had done what he thought was best for me, and his final wishes had to be honored. I didn't even look at Karina as the proceedings wrapped up. I couldn't bring myself to. I could hear her muttering under her breath, but I didn't care. She was defeated. The judge ruled in my favor, dismissing Karina's claims and solidifying the terms of Glenn's will. My inheritance was mine to keep, but the relief I expected never came. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like an end. Outside the courtroom, Karina approached me. She was shaking, her face twisted in anger and disbelief. "This isn't over, Wendell," she spat, her voice low and vicious. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll find a way to get what's mine. I'll make sure you pay for this." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Her words meant nothing anymore. Everything she had done to me, the manipulation, the lies, the constant control, had led her to this moment. And now, she had nothing left. She was out of moves. "Good luck," I said quietly, walking past her without a second glance. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't known was possible: peace. The court battle was over, and I had won. But more than that, I was free. Completely free. And as I walked away from the courthouse, I knew that this was the last time Karina would ever have any hold on me. The first few days after the court ruling were a blur. Karina's defeat was undeniable, but the aftermath left me feeling oddly detached. It wasn't the victory I had imagined it would be. No celebrations. No triumph. Just a quiet, almost empty feeling that settled over me as I adjusted to life without her, without the constant manipulation. I needed to rebuild, to start fresh. And so, I found myself looking for a place away from the remnants of my old life, away from the shadows of the Darby estate and everything it represented. I didn't need the mansion. I didn't need the wealth or the inheritance. I just needed peace. After a few weeks of searching, I found it. A small, modest house on the edge of town, tucked away by a lake. It wasn't much, nothing fancy, but it was mine. And for the first time in what felt like forever, it was enough. The house was quiet, peaceful. It had a warmth that I hadn't felt in years. I unpacked my things, organizing the small space, hanging up a few photos from the life I had left behind. I didn't keep much, just the essentials. It felt good to let go of the things I didn't need. The old, heavy baggage that had come with Karina, with the Darby family. It was all gone. The first few weeks passed in a haze of routine. I woke up early every morning, made myself coffee, and spent my days getting acquainted with the area. I walked around the lake, breathing in the crisp air, and I began to volunteer at the nearby dog sanctuary, just as Glennswell had mentioned. The sanctuary had a calm energy about it, nothing like the chaos I'd left behind. I helped walk the dogs, take care of them, and even assist with fundraising events. It was simple work, but it was work that brought me peace, a sense of purpose that had been missing from my life for so long. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out the dog kennels, one of the workers, a woman named Maria, approached me with a hesitant smile. She was in her early 30s, with long brown hair and a warmth that reminded me of the kind of people I had once known, people who didn't want anything from me. "Hey, Wendell," Maria said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "There's a fundraiser coming up next month. We're hoping to raise money for the new wing of the shelter. Would you be willing to help out? Maybe donate something for the silent auction?" I looked up from my work, a little surprised. I'd only been at the sanctuary for a few weeks, and I didn't think anyone had noticed me enough to ask for favors. But something in me, something deep and buried, knew that this was the kind of life I wanted. It was a simple request, one that didn't come with strings attached. "Of course," I said, smiling for the first time in a long while. "I'd be happy to help." She nodded, her face lighting up. "Thank you, Wendell. I think the animals will really appreciate it." As I left the sanctuary that day, something shifted within me. This, helping out, making small differences, was the kind of life I had been searching for. It was quiet. It was fulfilling. It was real. A few weeks later, the fundraiser came, and I found myself in the midst of a bustling event, surrounded by kind-hearted people who were passionate about animal welfare. There was no glitz, no glamour, no pretense. Just good people coming together for a good cause. I made a small donation of my own, enough to contribute but not enough to make a spectacle of myself. As the event wound down, I found myself talking to Maria again, this time about my life and what had brought me here. I wasn't one for sharing much, but something about her made me feel at ease. "I'm glad you found this place," Maria said as we watched a few volunteers gather the last of the donations. "You seem like you're in a better place now." I nodded, taking in her words. "I think I am. It's strange, but I think I finally understand what it means to have peace. I was always chasing something, trying to get something back, but I never realized that it wasn't about what I had. It was about what I could let go of." Maria smiled softly, her eyes understanding. "I get that. Sometimes the things we think we need the most are the very things that hold us back." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of my past bearing down on me. I felt lighter. The burden of the Darby estate, the inheritance, the manipulation, It all seemed so far away now. What mattered was the life I was building here, the quiet moments and small victories. A month later, I was sitting on the porch of my new home, watching the sunset over the lake. I had a mug of coffee in my hands, the steam rising into the cool evening air. The world around me felt still, untouched by the chaos I'd left behind. The dogs I had adopted from the sanctuary, two rescues that had quickly become my companions, were lying by my feet, content. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had led me to this point, I realized that I had finally found what I needed. It wasn't the money, the inheritance, or the promises from Glenn. It was peace. It was a life free from manipulation and control. It was the chance to rebuild, not just my finances, but myself. I had learned the hard way that sometimes, the things that seem like blessings can be the very things that trap you. And sometimes, the things you think you need the most, like wealth, like power, can blind you to what you already have, the ability to walk away, to choose your own path. And for the first time, I felt truly free. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, I closed my eyes, letting the peace settle over me. This was my life now. No more games. No more manipulation. Just me, the dogs, and a future that was finally mine to control. And that, I realized, was enough. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned.